welcome back to the deep dive. If you had to name, like, the global brand leader of espionage, the face that pops up instantly is James Bond, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's probably the only job on Earth where, a fictional character is way more famous than any real person, living or dead.
It's incredible.
And that mass appeal, the whole covert ops and double agents thing, it just lasts. Think about Skyfall's success, or, the Queen doing that Olympic entrance with Daniel Craig, just brilliant.
That enduring fascination with cunning, with deception, that's exactly what we're digging into today. But we're pivoting way back, like 3,000 years.
Yeah, forget the gadgets and the martinis for a bit.
We're going right back to the foundations of Western civilization, really, to the adventures of Odysseus.
And that's our mission for you today. We're doing a deep dive into the sources, trying to uncover how ancient Greece actually navigated this whole world of intelligence and, well, outright deception.
From mythological master spies
To the double agents that literally changed the course of history. And this is crucial, why they so often trusted divine prophecy over, actual human spies.
sometimes with pretty disastrous results, as we'll see.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this ancient blueprint for deception. We really have to start with the man who practically wrote the book, Odysseus. He was known everywhere as Kurna's Odysseus, cunning Odysseus.
He was so good at it, the goddess Athena herself. She basically tells him, look, both of us, we're experts in deceit, you among men, me among the gods. High praise.
This says it all, doesn't it? And what's fascinating, like you said, he wasn't just some heroic warrior. His main talent, really, was using spycraft to get what he wanted.
Yeah, take the Iliad. During the Trojan War, which was just this long, brutal slog, he volunteers. He steps up for the Greeks' first recorded covert op, teaming up with Diomedes to scout the enemy camp at night.
And almost right away, they run into, well, is it trouble or opportunity? They find Dolan, a Trojan spy, doing his own recon.
And Odysseus, he doesn't fight him fairly. No way. It's pure psychological warfare. He tricks Dolan, makes him think he'll live if he just spills the beans about the Trojan positions, their plans.
And Dolan, completely terrified, he cooperates, tells them everything they need.
But here's where ancient spycraft gets really brutal, pragmatic, I guess. Once they have the information, Diomedes tells Dolan, forget about escaping.
Yeah, the source says, as Dolan is literally begging for his life, Diomedes just slashes his neck with a sword. Instant.
No hesitation. That act, that bloodshed, it was like the final punctuation mark on the mission. Information extracted, risk eliminated.
They got the intel, killed the source, and went back to their own camp with stolen Thracian horses, proof of success. Deception was just a tool, wasn't it?
Absolutely, just a means to an end. And that same cunning pops up again in their second big mission, stealing the sacred Palladian.
Right, this divine statue from Athena's temple inside Troy.
Because they'd captured a Trojan prophet who told them Troy couldn't fall as long as that statue was safe inside the city walls.
The sheer audacity of sneaking back into the city they were besieging. And there's that amazing detail where Helen, the Helen, cause of the whole war, she actually recognizes Odysseus in disguise.
But she doesn't give up. She keeps quiet. Says a lot about Odysseus, maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe about her own feelings towards the Trojans by then.
Could be. But the act, the one deception that really cemented his legend for millennia, that had to be the Trojan Horse.
Oh, definitely. Homer mentions it. Virgil goes into detail. It was the ultimate con job, the greatest confidence trick, maybe ever.
For 3,000 years, it stood as the most famous military deception. The Greeks pretend to sail away, defeated. They leave this giant wooden horse.
And the Trojans, they celebrate. They think, great, a victory offering. Drag it right inside their supposedly impenetrable walls.
A total failure of, well, basic security checks, wasn't it?
Completely. They had no idea. Odysseus and his best fighters were crammed inside that thing, waiting.
And that night, they slip out, open the city gates for the Greek army, which had just sailed back under cover of darkness. Troy was finished overnight.
It's the ultimate proof, really. Calculated deception just won a war that 10 years of fighting couldn't. People say it wasn't until the double-cross system in World War II.
Right, with the fake D-Day landings.
Exactly. Not until then did the Trojan horse really have a rival for history's greatest military trick.
So let's jump forward. We're moving into the classical era now, the 5th century BC. And we see this kind of tactical deception move from myth into, well, recorded history, particularly during the Persian Wars.
But before we get to a big deception success story, we probably should mention the big intelligence failure. Thermopylae, 480 BC.
Yeah, I can't really talk about this period without mentioning that.
It was just catastrophic. The Spartans, the Thespians, holding that narrow pass so heroically, but they were betrayed.
By Ephialtes, the first traitor in history whose name we actually know. He showed the Persians a hidden mountain track around the pass.
Sealed their fate. And his name, Ephialtes, in modern Greek, it still just means nightmare or traitor.
Tells you everything, doesn't it? The impact of that one betrayal, that failure.
But then, just weeks later, shift the scene to the sea. And you get the absolute strategic brilliance of Themistocles at the Battle of Salamis. This is the first really decisive naval battle in recorded history.
And how did he win? With a double agent. Sisinus, a loyal slave from his own household, part of the Athenian fleet.
The plan was incredibly bold. Sisinus goes straight to the Persian king, Xerxes, who's there with this massive invasion force, and Sisinus feeds him this totally convincing but totally false intelligence.
He tells Xerxes that the other Greek allies, the non-Athenians, they're scared. They're planning to slip away from Salamis during the night.
And not only that, he whispers that Themistocles himself, the Athenian commander, is secretly ready to switch sides, to join the Persians.
Just audacious, pure bait.
Perfect bait. Because Themistocles desperately needed Xerxes to commit his huge fleet, which vastly outnumbered the Greeks, into the narrow straits around Salamis Island.
Where their size would actually be a disadvantage.
Exactly. Once those big Persian ships were crammed in there, the smaller, much more maneuverable Greek triremes with their underwater rams could just tear them apart.
And the trap sprung perfectly. Xerxes famously watching from his golden throne up on the hillside.
Expecting to see his fleet crush the Greeks.
And instead, he watches this total disaster unfold. Around 200 of his ships lost or captured. The Greeks lost maybe 40.
That calculated use of a double agent, that piece of disinformation, it basically saved Greece.
So given these huge successes, right? The Trojan Horse, which everyone knew about, and now this documented, history-changing win at Salamis using a double agent, you'd think classical Athens would have gone all in on organized spying.
You would absolutely assume that, build up an intelligence service, right?
But they didn't. And this is what we're calling the Athenian paradox. Why would a state that clearly understood and benefited from the Odysseus-type trick, why did they fail to, systematize it?
It's a puzzle. We get a hint, maybe, from Pericles himself in his famous funeral oration, the one recorded by Thucydides.
Right, where he's praising Athens.
He proudly states that Athens is different. It scorns all surveillance, all trickery, all secrecy.
He says, we keep our city open to the world. We don't deport foreigners to stop them learning our secrets.
It's this incredibly inspiring vision of radical openness, really noble, but you look back with hindsight and it seems, well...
deeply naive.
Yeah, naive from a military or security perspective. And it arguably contributed directly to some major failures later on.
So if not human spies, what did they rely on?
Mantis, seers, and oracles, especially the oracle at Delphi.
So like fortune tellers.
Sort of, but much more official and respected. Leading generals, big names like Cimon, Pericles himself, even Alcibiades later, they had personal seers on the state payroll.
Paid by the government.
Yes. The underlying belief was genuinely that the gods offered better, more reliable intelligence about the future, about enemy intentions, than any human source possibly could.
Wow. Is there an example of this working or seeming to work?
Well, the famous one is Tisamenes. He was the Spartan seer at the huge land battle of Plataea in 479 BC, the year after Salamis. He kept examining the sacrifices.
Reading the entrails and things.
Exactly, reading the omens and the animal entrails. And he advised the Greek commanders to stay purely defensive. The omens were bad for attacking.
And the Persians.
Their commander, Mardonius, apparently got impatient. He ignored his own seers, who were also giving bad omens, ordered the attack, crossed the river, and was killed, leading to a massive Persian defeat.
So for the Greeks, that would just reinforce the idea, listen to the seer, he was right.
Precisely. It seemed to validate the whole system of divination over, say, scouting reports.
How did these divine sources actually work, though? You mentioned animal entrails.
Yeah, that practice, hepatoscopy, reading the liver, was huge. Largely imported, scholars think, from the Near East, along with interpreting bird flight or analyzing dreams.
And Delphi, that was the big one, wasn't it? The most famous oracle.
The most sacred site, really. You had the Pythia, the priestess, sitting on this tripod, supposedly inhaling vapors, going into a trance.
And muttering things.
Muttering cryptic pronouncements,
Yeah.
yeah. Which older male priests would then translate or interpret, often into these ambiguous verses.
Okay, but was it purely divine revelation? Or was there maybe a more human intelligence angle going on there, too.
Ah, now that's the twist, isn't it? The priests absolutely claimed it was Apollo speaking directly through the Pythia, divine revelation.
Ah.
But think about it. Delphi was unique. You had people coming from everywhere. Ambassadors, kings, generals, rich merchants, ordinary citizens from all over Greece, the Mediterranean, even further, all coming to ask for advice.
So the priests are hearing everyone's plans, their fears, their political situations?
Exactly. They're getting this constant stream of high-level human intelligence, probably the best collection of intel in the ancient world. So when they issued these pronouncements, these prophecies, they weren't just random guesses.
They could tailor them based on what they already knew was happening politically or militarily.
Very likely. They had unparalleled insight into the hopes and fears and intentions, basically everyone who mattered. It gave their divine pronouncements remarkable timeliness and relevance.
So Delphi was almost like the ancient world's most trusted intelligence clearinghouse, but disguised as a purely religious site.
That's a great way to put it. But this deep reliance on faith, on prophecy, rather than actively gathering and vetting human intelligence, it eventually led Athens into one of its biggest, most costly blunders.
You're talking about the Sicilian expedition.
The Sicilian expedition, 415 BC, during the long Peloponnesian War against Sparta, it was an intelligence failure on a truly epic scale.
Thucydides, who wrote the history, he's scathing about it, isn't he?
He really is. He says most Athenians who voted for this massive invasion, they were completely ignorant. They had no real idea how big Sicily was, how many people lived there, what resources it had.
And yet they agreed to send what Thucydides calls the most costly and magnificent Greek force ever sent out by a single city up to that point. Why?
They were basically tricked, lured in by the spectacular hoax perpetrated by their Sicilian ally, the city of Egesta.
Egesta wanted Athens to come fight their local rivals, Syracuse.
Right, but they needed Athens to think Egesta could help pay for it. So when Athenian envoys visited, the Egestans put on this huge show of wealth, lavish banquets.
With gold and silver cups and plates everywhere.
Exactly, implying they were incredibly rich. But here's the incredible part, the deception.
Or was it?
The Egestans didn't actually have that much gold and silver. They gathered up all the precious items they did have, plus borrowed some from neighbors. And then, secretly, they moved the exact same set of gold and silver plates and cups from house to house, banquet to banquet, wherever the Athenian envoys were being entertained.
No way. So the Athenians saw what they thought were different, huge collections of wealth everywhere they went.
But it was the same stuff being reused over and over. The envoys went back to Athens completely fooled. Their report about Egesta's vast riches was, as Thucydides dryly puts it, as attractive as it was unrealistic.
Wow. And the Athenian assembly just bought it.
Hook, line, and sinker. You know, it makes you pause and think, doesn't it? How often today, maybe in business pitches or even political campaigns, do we fall for that? The slick presentation, the projection of success or capability that looks amazing?
But maybe isn't actually real.
Exactly. The Athenians were blinded by what they wanted to believe. They wanted this glorious, profitable expansion.
And then to make things even worse, there was the whole Alcibiades situation.
Oh, Alcibiades. Talk about compounding the failure. He was one of the main generals pushing for the expedition. Super charismatic, popular, but also reckless.
And just before the fleet sails, this huge scandal breaks out in Athens. The Hermae, these sacred statues all over the city, they were vandalized overnight.
Mutilated. It was seen as a terrible omen, possibly treason, and Alcibiades got implicated, maybe fairly, maybe not.
So they recall him from the expedition fleet to stand trial.
Yes. But instead of going back to Athens to face the music, he defects, jumps ship, and goes straight to the enemy, to Sparta.
Unbelievable. The general who planned the invasion defects to the other side.
And he becomes an absolute intelligence goldmine for the Spartans. He tells them exactly what the Athenians are planning in Sicily. He advises them on the best way to help Syracuse defeat the Athenians.
And crucially, he gives them that key strategic advice about Attica itself, right?
Yes. He tells them to build a permanent fort at Decelea, right in Athenian territory, just north of the city. This allowed the Spartans to raid Attica year-round, cutting off supplies, especially from the silver mines, and crippling the Athenian economy for the rest of the war.
Alcibiades really becomes, as some historians say, maybe the most skillful, certainly the most colorful, high-profile defector in intelligence history.
Absolutely. And his story just keeps going. He doesn't even stay loyal to Sparta for long. He has an affair with the Spartan king's wife.
You can't make this stuff up.
Right. He has to flee Sparta, ends up cozying up to the Persians, becoming an advisor to the satrap Tissaphernes. Then he starts playing Athens and Persia off against each other, trying to get back into Athens' good graces.
It's just the ultimate double dealer.
Textbook definition. He managed it for a while, this incredible balancing act, but it couldn't last. His constant maneuvering made too many enemies. He was eventually assassinated, probably by Tissaphernes' agents, around 404 BC, right as Athens finally lost the war.
So it seems like it took these kinds of disasters, the Sicilian expedition, Alcibiades' betrayal, for Greek military thinking to finally start catching up on the intelligence front.
It seems that way. It really wasn't until the next century, the 4th century BC, that you see military writers starting to systematically address the need for tactical human intelligence.
And Xenophon is key here. Soldier, historian, philosopher.
Xenophon is really the first one we have who writes in detail about practical stuff like reconnaissance, scouting enemy territory, understanding the terrain before you commit your army.
What kind of methods did he suggest?
He advocated using agents, but often just, neutral civilians or merchants who could travel around enemy territory without raising too much suspicion and report back.
Makes sense.
He even suggested using fake defectors, sending your own soldiers over to the enemy pretending to desert so they could feed misinformation or gather intel from the inside.
So he's laying the groundwork for professional, human-based intelligence gathering.
He absolutely is. But, and this is a big but, even Xenophon, for all his practical advice, still insisted that consulting the gods through divination was ultimately more important.
Still, after everything.
Still. Because, in his view, only the gods truly knew the future. Human intelligence could tell you about the enemy's disposition, but only the gods knew if your overall plan was fundamentally sound, if it was destined to succeed or fail.
So progress, but still deeply tied to that older belief system.
Exactly. Now, his contemporary, or a slightly younger contemporary, Aristotle, he takes a bigger step towards skepticism.
He's a fun student, wasn't he? No, wait, that's Alexander.
Yeah.
Aristotle was Plato's student.
Right. Aristotle, Plato's student. He really questions divination. He argues, for instance, that dreams probably don't foretell the future. If they sometimes seem to, it's likely just coincidence.
What is reasoning?
He points out that animals also dream. And since animals presumably don't receive divine messages, dreams are probably just a natural psychological phenomenon, not prophecy.
That's quite a modern-sounding argument, actually.
It is. And instead of focusing on divine intelligence, Aristotle turns his attention much more towards, domestic surveillance, internal security.
Yeah, so.
In his work, The Politics, he advises rulers, especially tyrants who are worried about being overthrown, to set up systems to monitor potential revolutionaries. Keep an eye on dissent.
So, spies.
Yes, specifically spies. He uses the word kataskopoi. And also, interestingly, eavesdroppers, otokustai, people who listen in on conversations.
Who would these eavesdroppers be?
Now, this is fascinating. Aristotle suggests recruiting people who could blend into social gatherings, people who wouldn't normally be suspected of spying. He specifically mentions using potokagids. People like flute girls, musicians, courtesans, people who were present at parties and symposia, heard all the gossip, all the potentially seditious talk, but were socially kind of invisible?
So, using marginalized people as an internal security network.
Essentially, yes. Building a clandestine network using the least suspected members of society to report back to the ruler.
Okay, speaking of Aristotle's students, though.
Yeah.
Alexander the Great, Aristotle's most famous pupil. How did he handle intelligence?
Well, Alexander was a master of logistics. He absolutely understood that armies march on their stomachs. His campaigns were incredibly well supplied, and that relied heavily on good reconnaissance.
Scouting ahead.
Definitely. Scouting territory for resources, checking roads, understanding the terrain. That practical Xenophon-style intelligence was vital to his success.
But what about spies, agents, deception like Odysseus?
Less so, it seems. Despite being Aristotle's student, Alexander seems to have reverted, or perhaps always leaned towards, the older model. He relied far more heavily on his seer than on a network of spies for strategic decisions.
He had a personal seer, too.
Oh, yes. Aristander of Telmessos. He was one of Alexander's most trusted advisors. Sources say Alexander valued Aristander's counsel on whether to fight, when to move, as much as a modern general might value his director of intelligence.
Is there a specific instance where this really comes through?
The classic example is the incident at the Tanis River, probably the Jaxartes River, actually, on the border with the Scythians. Aristotle reads the omens and strongly warned Alexander not to cross the river to attack the Scythians.
Why not?
The omens showed the king's life was in specific peril if he crossed.
And Alexander? He listened.
Nope, he ignored the warning. He was Alexander, after all. He crossed the river, fought the Scythians, and won the battle.
So Aristotle was wrong.
But wait. Shortly after the battle, Alexander became critically ill from drinking bad water from the river. He nearly died.
So the battle was won, but the prophecy about his life being in danger if he crossed
Was still vindicated. In Alexander's mind, and probably Aristotle's, this just proved the seer was right all along. The gods knew best.
It seems Alexander got more reliant on this over time.
Yeah. The sources suggest that later in his life, especially after he reached Babylon, he became almost, quote, enslaved to superstition. His court was apparently filled with diviners and seers from all over. For Alexander, ultimately, communicating with the gods seems superior to trusting human reports.
So let's try to wrap this up. We look back across these sources, these thousands of years. What's the big picture? Ancient Greece, on the one hand, gives us some of the most famous, most ingenious acts of deception in history. Odysseus, the Trojan Horse, Salamis.
Pioneers in the art of the trick, you could say.
Absolutely. But on the other hand, they seem to have had this profound cultural blind spot when it came to developing organized, professional human intelligence gathering,
Yeah.
at least until very late.
Yeah, this paradox runs right through the sources. They kept prioritizing divination, trusting seers and oracles, often substituting hope or belief for hard, verifiable intelligence gathered by humans.
And that failure, as we saw with the Sicilian expedition, could be incredibly costly. Believing the attractive story, the Egesta hoax, instead of doing the basic homework.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Today, we're just drowning in information. We have data constantly, narratives being pushed at us from all angles, motivated storytelling everywhere.
So the final thought for you, listening, is maybe this. How often do we still do that? Like the Athenians before Sicily. How often do we fail to distinguish between genuinely vetted intelligence, the hard facts, even if they're uncomfortable?
And a story that's just appealing. A narrative that feels right, that confirms our biases, that's, as attractive as it was unrealistic. What essential facts might you be overlooking right now simply because you prefer the comfort of a different story?